morning, Dr. Fu. We're very pleased to have you here at Yeshiva University to initiate what we hope will be a productive collaboration of scholarship between Shandong University and our university, in particular your Judaic Studies and Interreligious Studies Department and our Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies through the auspices of YU Global. So welcome. And we are very interested, having had a number of conversations, we're interested in hearing from you what interests you about Judaic studies, what your own personal experience has been, and what brought you to Judaic studies, and what you think might bring other Chinese students in your university to Judaic studies.
Good morning, Professor Cohen. It's my pleasure and honor to visit Yeshiva University and to be interviewed by you, a well-known Jewish philosopher. As far as I learned that we share some common interest in Maimonides. Well, with regard to the question, how I got to Judaic studies and my personal experience and my students' interest in Judaism, well, I would like to say that Spinoza was the matchmaker between me and Judaism. When I studied for master's degree a long time ago, I wrote a thesis about Spinoza, his theory about substance and attributes. And at the end of 1984, I became a faculty member in the Department of Philosophy at the university. A few years later, a group of Chinese scholars of Spinoza want to publish the complete works of Spinoza. So I was invited to translate one of the books, one of the complete works of Spinoza, and that is Hebrew grammar, by Spinoza. I just received the photocopied book and tried to start my translation. I found it's really very demanding because I had no knowledge of Hebrew. It happened I received a brochure from Oxford Center for Hebrew Studies saying a one-year postgraduate program available, and it's open to the scholars and the students all over the world. So I applied for this program and I succeeded and I went to Oxford.
What year was that?
In Oxford Center for Hebrew Studies, I went to the Oxford in October 1992, just 10 months after the establishment of the diplomatic relation between China and Israel.
I see.
Mm-hmm. So that is my start of Jewish studies. Well, in China, for a long time in the history, we had no idea of Judaism and Jewish people. We just know some negative term, Zionism, meaning the Jewish people killed Palestinians and they occupied the territory. We just knew the name of Philo and the Maimonides in the textbook, nothing else. Mm-hmm. So I think when I start to learn Judaism, the Hebrew language, history of Judaism, the Bible, and some portion of Talmud, I think, it's a great culture like a ocean, and it's really I need to swim for my whole life. So gradually, I think so. I was obliged to introduce Jewish culture to the Chinese people. So when I started in Oxford, I also went to Liebau College. That's the Reformed Jewish College.
Leo Beck College,
it's
yes.
a rabbinic college
That's right.
to train Reform rabbis.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I went there for Maimonides studies. There is two professors teaching the guide for the perplexed. So at that time in Oxford, there was no philosophical course, but the Bible, Talmud, the history of Jewish people, Zionism, something like that, to make up. So I went to Liaobai College for Maimonides studies. So following the one-year program in Oxford, I moved from Oxford to Liaobai College, continued my study of Judaism. So I attended the class by Chaim Makbei about Jewish history, and some other courses provided by Professor Friedland, Solomon, Esther, Jonathan, the faculty team in Liaobai College. I really learned a lot. At that time, I was determined to return to China to establish an institute to do translation, to introduce Jewish culture to the Chinese people.
That was really quite a vision to, already you had that concept, that vision to start an institute and you established
Actually, I made
institute.
up my mind in my study in Britain, in Oxford and in Liaobai College,
and so
London.
when did you found the institute at Shandong University?
As soon as I returned to China in the summer of 1994,
right.
I went to Hebrew University, the Institute for Advanced Studies.
Yes.
For the summer school.
That's
I
right.
listened to the lectures given by Professor Tursky from Harvard.
Oh, yes,
Marvin
certainly.
Fox from Brandeis, and some other well-known professors.
Right.
So after my visit to Israel, I returned to Shandong University. As soon as I returned to the university, I wrote a report to the vice president in charge of humanities in order to establish a center for Judaic studies.
Right.
So very soon, my report was approved by the university, so I succeed in establishing the
That's
the
quite
institute.
an accomplishment because this was you said in 1994 in communist China. That is quite an accomplishment that your report was approved. And do you feel that, how did this coincide with cultural tendencies in communist China at the time? Would it have been possible 20 years earlier? You perhaps were at the right place at the right time. Could you comment a little bit about that, about your ability to kind of succeed in establishing such an institute in the mid-90s, which if you could also describe how it has progressed since then. That's just over 20 years now.
Well, after the Cultural Revolution, and China opened the door to the West.
The Cultural Revolution in the 60s.
Yes. The Cultural Revolution began in 1966 and ended in 1976.
Right.
So after the Cultural Revolution, we gradually start to reform, economic reform, and open the door to the West. And in the universities, gradually, the professors and the students had the freedom to do independent research. I went to university after 1977. Actually, I was one of the first batch of university students after the Cultural Revolution. We studied Marxist philosophy, Western philosophy, Chinese philosophy. At that time, the political ideology was still influential, but gradually it's not so serious. I mean, gradually we had freedom to do research, to talk about Western philosophy, Chinese philosophy, different religions. We had no knowledge of Judaism, but we know some, have some basic knowledge of Christianity and other religions. Anyway, in 1990s, and the atmosphere in the university, I think, is quite liberal. I think it's way.
It was liberalized.
Yeah, it's liberalized, and we can do research independently. So that is why my report to establish the Center for Judaic Studies was very soon approved by the university.
Okay, so now that you said was in the mid-90s, and you had approval for, I wanted to ask you what was the size that of the institute at that time, and how has it grown since 1995, 94, 95?
Actually, in the beginning, I myself was the only member of
You were the institute.
Yeah, in the institute. But we have some collaborators in the philosophy department. The first project we did since the establishment of the center is the translation of the series of great books of Jewish studies.
Right.
Professor Chaim Maccabee helped me deciding what books we should translate. So he gave me a list of books, and I chose some books, and then I consulted him. He said, okay. So we started from his book. He edited the Judaism on Trial, then the Everyman's Talmud, and the guide.
So I'm sorry, the Judaism on Trial, you said that's Chaim Maccabee's book?
Yeah, he added.
Right.
It's talk about the three disputations in the Middle Ages, and the three disputations between Jews, between Nachmanides and
Nachmanides, yes.
Between the three disputations.
We actually have here, this is the commentary of Nachmanides on the Bible. And so, yes, he was involved in a disputation in Barcelona.
Yeah.
That's right. So that you translated that.
Yeah. So
that's Nachmanides.
Judaism on Trial.
Right.
Maimonides' Guide for Perplexed.
Right. So the Guide of the Perplexed you had mentioned already, and you had told me earlier that you had translated.
Yeah.
That is this volume that was originally written in Arabic, and it was translated in the Middle Ages into Hebrew. This is an edition published in Turkey in Arabic script, based on manuscripts found there. So you translated, you mentioned to me earlier, and I wanted you to comment a little bit on that, because I think our audience would be fascinated by what you found interesting in Maimonides, in the Guide of the Perplexed. How does it resonate for someone from a Chinese background?
Well, I decided to translate Maimonides' Guide into Chinese, mainly because the connection between Spinoza and Maimonides.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Now, Spinoza was a Dutch Jewish philosopher.
Yes.
Now, when I did my studies of Spinoza a long time ago, I just know there must be some link between Spinoza's philosophy and Maimonides, but we didn't know much. Just know there must be. We guess there must be some connection between them. Later, when I started Maimonides' guide, whether the first chapter about theology, God, his interpretation about Genesis.
That's right. The first verses in Genesis.
Yes,
right?
and also the end of the guide about intellectual love for God.
That's right.
That is
yes.
The highest
human.
level,
That's human perfection.
The highest level of happiness.
That's right.
So which closely connect with Maimonides.
Yes.
So that is the motivation for me to translate the guide. Of course, I also learned from nearby college and Oxford, that Maimonides is the representative of medieval Jewish philosophy. He actually stands on the peak of the
according to many
philosophical
thinkers.
world, the Jewish philosophical world.
He certainly is characteristic of Jewish philosophy.
So I include Maimonides got into the list of translation. Apart from Judaism on Trial, Guide for the Perplexed, we also translated Judaism as a Civilization by Mordechai Kaplan, Martin Buber's on Judaism, Leo Back's On the Essence of Judaism, Abraham Cohen's Everyman's Talmud, and Ludowitzki, the modern Jewish religious movement, a history of emancipation and adjustment. Rosenzweiger's for the Staff of Redemption, so on and so forth. So far, 16 books have been published, and the other 3 or 4 are in the publishing house. I think in the end of this year or next year, the translation will be increased to 20.
So
by the way, I think I have to point out, in our translation, Mishnah is also included. A professor from Tel Aviv University, he's a Chinese, Professor Zhang Ping. He's a professor in Tel Aviv University, but he studied in Beijing University, in Tel Aviv University, and he's working in Tel Aviv University, and he did the translation of Mishnah, the first book of Mishnah. He translated and we published it. We published it 2 years ago. He's doing the second book, and he planned to spend 10 years to finish the six
orders of the Mishnah. That is fascinating. To have a translation of the Mishnah into Chinese is really something that is characteristic of Jewish culture and Jewish tradition. Your knowledge of Mishnah yourself was very impressive when you spent Shabbat at our home, and I told you that I can't write an inscription, and you said you can't write 2 letters. So that revealed to me that you had studied the Mishnah of Shabbat, and I wanted to just ask you on a more personal note. I showed you a book that my grandfather penned, which I was pleasantly surprised how interested you became in it after we spoke about the Japanese occupation of China in the 1930s in what we call World War II, but it may be called by a different name in China at the time that the Japanese occupied China. You said from 1936 1937 to 1945, and how it was a cruel occupation, which motivated me to show you a book written by my grandfather called Sein Kampf, and it was an answer to Hitler's Mein Kampf. And ultimately, my grandfather, who lived in Vienna, was captured by the Nazis and was killed because he wrote that book. But you took a liking to it. I was curious what you saw in that book. You even said you would like to commission its translation from German into Chinese. What was it in that book that interested you?
I'm not sure I will surely translate it into Chinese, but when I read the book, it's really surprised me that your grandfather published the book in 1935. That is the early period of
Nazism.
Nazism.
National Socialism.
Actually, the Holocaust didn't happen at that time.
That's right.
So your father published a book against Hitler and before the Holocaust. So I read some books about the Holocaust. I know the concentration camp in Poland, and the 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. But I didn't know that before the Holocaust, the Jewish people, Jewish scholars like your father, courageous enough to stand up against Hitler, against the National Socialism, National Socialist regime. I mean, the Nazi is a government.
Right.
And your grandfather's book criticized Hitler's idea of anti-Semitism in his My Struggle, Mein
Kampf. Right,
yeah,
Mein
so,
Kampf.
yeah. So I really admire your grandfather. Of course, I think there must be some other Jewish people who were so courageous to defend themselves against the Hitler. I have nearly finished the whole book. You know, your father gave many examples to illustrate that the Jewish people love Germany. They took Germany as their motherland and to defend it. All of the allegations against the Jews were just nonsense. You know, the book is really impressive. Left me very deep impression. When I return to China, I will surely ask my colleague. You know, she understands German very well. If she could find a German copy, I would encourage her to translate. But I'm not sure I will certainly translate
well,
it.
It's interesting because you're correct. In 1935, it still was, to some extent, an intellectual. Someone could construe it as an intellectual debate. He was debunking every line of Mein Kampf with the argument that the Germans, that the Jews didn't contribute to German society, and he had a list of Jews who contributed to art, to literature, to science, to medicine. It's unfortunate because he thought you could fight military might with scholarship. And as much as we as university people and as academics believe in scholarship, that's not always what prevails, unfortunately. But
may I add a few words about my translation?
Yes.
I mean, the future translation.
Please. Yes.
Now we have done. The publishing house have published 16 volume translations so far, but we will go further. I mean, we'll continue the translation. For the time being, we have accepted a very demanding task of a translation. I mean, the translation for Talmud. A very well-known rabbi in Israel, Rabbi Adin
Steinsaltz, yes.
His version of Talmud. He asked us, I mean our center, to translate into Chinese. Of course, I know he has also found some translators in Russia, in Spain.
Yes.
I mean, he planned to translate Talmud into Russian, Spanish, and Chinese, and Japanese. You know, different languages. A retired professor, Andy Plux. He was a professor in Princeton University, and of course, you know, he's Jewish and he has very good knowledge of Judaism, and he's also a sinologist. You know, he knows Chinese very well. So he will be in charge of this translation, but I will help him.
Yeah.
And we have chosen some right persons to do the translation.
Right.
I think we will start the translation in the end of this year. I think we will take more than 10 years to
that's an enormous undertaking.
Yeah. But I think this is really important for us to concentrate on the Bible and the Talmud. You know, that's the basic scriptures and the written tradition and the oral tradition.
Right, right, yes, yes. Well, so that brings me to another question I had, which was maybe more academic. How do you foresee a cooperation between your center in Shandong University and Yeshiva University, and what is it? You've been here just yesterday and today at our school. You had a little bit of an introduction to some of our grounds, some of our faculty, our programs. You met with our doctoral students yesterday. What departments, what programs interest you at the Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies? Bernard Revel, that's his picture, he was the founding president, the founder of Yeshiva University as a whole, and in 1937 he established a graduate school of academic Jewish studies to study, well, at that time it was the Graduate School of Semitic Studies, but now we study Bible, Jewish history, Jewish philosophy, and Talmud academically. Which programs attract you? Which programs interest you? How do you see cooperation between our schools?
Mm-hmm. For the first time, I know Yeshiva University in my translating Rudavsky's book, Modern Religious Movement, the History of Emancipation Adjustment. I remember in the last chapter of the book, I mentioned the Jewish education in the United States. Mm-hmm. Yeshiva University is one of the good universities of Jewish studies. Mm-hmm. So it left me a very deep impression. So when I visit this university in the past several days, I met the graduate students and read some material about from the brochure. I know a little bit of the history and the faculty team. I think Bible studies and Talmudic studies and the inter-religious studies here, the faculty team is very, very strong. And we are interested in Bible studies. We have a very good scholar for Bible in our center. And we also interested in Talmud, as I mentioned to you the other day. A professor from Tel Aviv University came to our center to teach Mishnah and Gemara very regularly. Mm-hmm. So the Jewish classics is one of the focus of our research. Mm-hmm. I'm also personally interested in interreligious dialogue. Mm-hmm. Remember the name of our center?
That's right.
The Center for Judaic and Interreligious Studies. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning of the center, I realized the importance of interreligious dialogue and the comparative studies. The right. Importance of so I learned that you and some other colleagues have been active in interreligious studies. That you spent some time in Jerusalem, gathering the scholars from different countries to study Bible.
The scholars. We have a volume coming out on Jewish, Christian, and Muslim interpretation of
so
Scripture.
So you have been involved in, of course, I know you are a very good scholar for the Bible and also a good scholar for Maimonides, but I also know that you have been involved in interreligious dialogue or interpret the Bible from different perspectives. Mm-hmm. So this is also my interest. Yeah. So I think there are some, a lot of common interests between my center and the graduate school of Jewish studies here. Yeah, so I think we surely do some cooperation in the future.
Right. I feel that we understand our own tradition better if we see other traditions, and sometimes there are insights in other traditions, and this is something certainly Maimonides stood for, because he writes in one of his commentaries on the Mishnah that he will quote Aristotle, he will quote other philosophers, but he won't mention their name, because sometimes people will say, well, if it comes from an outsider, I won't take it. And Maimonides says you have to take the truth from where it comes. And certainly that's something that Yeshiva University stands for. The motto of Yeshiva University is Torah Umada. Torah is the Bible and Jewish thought, Jewish tradition, and Mada is science. And that means generally wisdom. And so we believe in that integration. And so I think that there's a lot that we can gain in working together.
Yeah, of course.
Is there anything further you would like to share that you think is relevant? I think you've covered so many interesting topics. Anything further you think might be of specifics when you return to China? What will you be working on at this point? That anything further that might interest you and might interest our audience?
First of all, I'm thinking and the possibility to establish some regular exchange between scholars and the students. I personally interested in Bible interpretation. I have successfully applied for a program translating the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, and give annotations. So when I do my translation, I think about the biblical verses from Chinese perspective, especially from Confucian and Taoist perspectives. So I give annotations. So I think if you agree, we can do some cooperative research. That you contribute your insights into the Bible, the same verses or different verses, and I contribute my understanding of the Bible. And we also have a good scholar. He's a Bible scholar from Hong Kong, from Chinese University Hong Kong. He's doing Bible studies with us. He will invite very well-known Bible study scholars to come in next June. I'm also, I think it's possible for us to perform some dialogue between Chinese culture and Judaism, especially between Confucianism and the Judaism. So actually, after 1980s, we more and more freedom we have in Chinese universities, and I think it is so important for us to assimilate the values and ideas from different religions and different philosophies. So I studied Western philosophy and Judaism. I think it's really significant for us to reconstruct our own culture. My generation, had a strong ideal to modernize China. We know the history after the Opium War, and we tried very hard to reform China economically, militarily, and politically, and we have achieved, made some progress, but we know we have to go further. So how to fulfill this great task to modernize China. I think one of the tasks for us, for the scholars in the university, is to assimilate different culture, the positive values from different cultures on the basis of our own tradition. So I think the Jewish people, especially modern Judaism, including Orthodox Judaism, conservative Judaism, and Reform Judaism, they put the root into their tradition. At the same time, to different degree, accept modern values, and they have successfully synthesized the different cultures.
Right.
So this is, I think, it's the right way for us to learn from the Jewish people. So I'm also think the possibility to do some cooperation in this academic area.
Well, thank you. You've really shared, I think, a vision of the best of what scholarship and academic work can do to enhance society. And I thank you very much. This really has been very illuminating, an illuminating discussion. Thank you, Dr. Fu.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to meet you.